I think we're live now. Okay. All right. So hello everyone. Hello guys here in Zoom, and hello to everybody else watching us on YouTube and on Facebook and wherever else we may be streaming. Okay. So today's subject is chord chasing, basics of chord chasing when soloing. So to give a quick introduction, what is chord chasing? Chord chasing is basically soloing with the chord changes in mind. So I would call it harmony aware soloing, okay? Which basically means that if usually you have one scale that encompasses the whole harmony unless the key changes somewhere in between. But if I have a chord sequence of, let's say, A minor, D minor, C major, and E, whatever, the chord progression is in the key of A minor in this case. And that means that you can just go on, use the A minor scale or the A minor pentatonic even, all the time, and just create melodies with it. Now, the method of chord chasing tries to follow the chord changes throughout, okay? So that means that if, let me just record a quick sequence here. So, what do we say? A minor, C major, and no, actually I'm gonna go A minor, D minor, C major, F major. That's gonna be my chord progression. Just a basic rhythm like this. And that E major at the end. So here we go. I'm gonna start by only using the A minor pentatonic, okay? Okay? I didn't do anything else but stay in the pentatonic scale in the first position, okay? Now I'm gonna give it a different approach. I'm gonna try to follow every chord change, and I'm gonna emphasize chord notes while that particular chord is in the background. So I'm still gonna use an A minor kind of a scale, but whenever the chord changes to C major, I'm gonna emphasize some of the notes of the C major chord. Whenever the chord becomes an F major, I'm gonna emphasize the F note and some other chord notes of the F major chord. And then in D minor, I'm gonna do the same thing. And it will sound something like this. Sorry, wrong changes. Here we go. Okay, what I did now in the last few bars was I played only the root notes for each chord. So if the chord progression is A, D, C, F major, I'm just emphasizing the root notes of each chord, okay? So I started here with an A note. Then I did this for the D minor chord. I just emphasized the D note here, and then I can also play any other D minor chord note. Then when the chord changes up to a C major, I'm gonna emphasize C major notes. And then F major, I'm gonna use this F note. And as you can probably see, this particular F note is not, give me just 1 second, is not a part of the A minor pentatonic scale at all, okay? So this note here, if I play the A minor pentatonic shape, I don't have this note in that scale, but when I throw it in, when the chord changes up to an F major, or a D minor as well, because D minor also has that note inside of it, then it sounds very good. But if I use this note over an A minor chord, while the chord is still A minor, it just wouldn't sit there right. It will ask of me to bring it back to a chord note, okay? We're gonna explain this to you today step by step, okay? This was just a very quick introduction. By the way, for those who joined a bit later and for those of you watching us on YouTube, we are Victor and Miguel. Both of us are instructors at the Guitar Zoom Academy. This is what we do at the Academy every day, all day. So if you're interested, I'm gonna drop this link again. Some of you are tired of hearing this already, but for the new guys, here it is. If you're interested, you can consider joining the Academy, and the first step to do so is to click on this link and book your first call with us, okay? Which costs nothing, and then we can talk about your further goals, okay? All right, so back to our chord chasing talk, which is today's subject. Miguel, do you have anything to add so far? What's your...
Yeah, I will add that, at the beginning it can be a little bit, overwhelming to try to fit all those notes of all the different chords if we're just used to play, maybe the minor pentatonic. But, we can start with maybe, for example, just two chords, or maybe, for example, the first two chords of the progression, the A minor and D minor. So it's important to recognize those notes and where those fit in the pattern that we're playing, right? So we're playing this pattern. So since we're playing an A minor pentatonic, that's kind of easy to visualize with the A minor chord, right? Because we have pretty much all the notes. Well, we have all the notes of the chord. But when we go to D minor, we already have, for example, this note. There's the one that you already mentioned for the F. You see, and we can notice that just by playing the chord, right? So A minor and D minor. So we can follow the shape of the chord, the bar chord that we all know, and we can see that we have this note, we have this one, you see, and some of these notes would fit in the pattern of the minor pentatonic. For example, like the first string, it's inside the pattern, but this one, it's not part of the pattern. And those notes, for me, are kind of the key notes that will, bring out your solos. Those are kind of the special notes that when you play them, you will start hearing the chord progression without even having the backing track in the back, right? So you see, you can kind of hear the chord change, and that's a little bit what is this is all about, right? The chord chasing. It's kind of drawing the harmony with a line. It's kind of seeing the harmony not in a vertical way, that all notes sounding at the same time. That's usually how we understand harmony, but seeing it maybe in a more horizontal way, in a more linear way. So play that and you can hear the A minor. You see, so I will start like that, just maybe getting used to two chords, seeing the shape within that same position, and trying to find especially those notes, the ones that are not part of the pattern. So that's how I will start practicing this What do you think, Victor?
Yes, absolutely. So there are, this is one of the ways to think about chord chasing, but it's probably the best way, especially if you're starting out with chord chasing, because you don't want to dive very deep into the theory behind it. I mean, you do, of course, but if you want to start digging into it right away and start using this method when improvising, when soloing, the best way to go is, the guitar is a very visual instrument, okay? Every chord has its own particular way of what it looks like, right? So why not use the notes that you already see inside the chord? If the chord is this one, which is a D minor chord, that means that I can use any of these notes that are already a part of the chord when soloing. So if I put some embellishments around them and then land on a chord note, on any of these chord notes. So what do I have here? D minor, right? I have 5th fret, 7th, 7th, 6th, 5th fret. Okay? That means that if I have a D minor chord in the background, let's say, what I do, I'm landing on one of these notes. Okay, so that means that if you think about all of the different shapes available to you in the cage system, that means that you can use these notes for a D minor, these notes coming from a sort of like a C-shaped D minor, then all of these notes here, then these notes here, and again here, what did I miss? A sort of a G-shaped D minor, if there is such a thing. But anyway, yeah. So that means that if you have, let's stick with D minor as a chord in the background of the music now, you can use any of these notes. Okay? And that's how you can easily move all over the fretboard just by visualizing the chord shapes in the cage system. You don't even have to think too much about scales per se, okay? If you know the D minor pentatonic in this case, okay, you can play it here, right? You can play it like this, and then jump up to this one, and connect it by using chord notes in between. So let's say I can play a lick like this. Pentatonic again, and now I'm gonna throw in a cage system chord again. Okay? I know that this may seem a bit too advanced, but it's not actually. If you are already familiar with the cage system, please try this out on your own and you'll see how easy it can become actually. Okay? So now what we did was we tried that over one chord. Now, what will happen if we decide to follow the chord changes using that same method? You can just, let's say, as Miguel already said, let's stick to only two chords, okay? A minor and D minor. That means that for A minor, I can use the A minor pentatonic in all of the positions that I know. Sorry. Okay, all of that plus all of the shapes of the A minor chord. So this kind of a shape, all of the notes that belong in this shape, all of the notes that come from this shape, all of the notes that come from this kind of a shape, then this shape, which is the D shape, and so on, okay? And that means that I can connect the whole fretboard just like that by visualizing all of the chord shapes and connecting the 5 positions of the pentatonic scale. Next, when the chord changes up to a D minor, I'm gonna do the same with the D minor shapes in the cage system, and also I can even switch the scale and start using the D pentatonic scale instead of the A pentatonic. Okay? All right. Miguel?
Yeah. So another way that we can see that it's, kind of break it down in, smaller shapes. So for example, I will start with this A minor and connecting it, for example, with this D minor, and start playing with that. So for example, I'm going to play here a backing track. So we have A minor and D minor, and I'll actually start playing just the chords, so maybe in a more rhythmic way, and you can slowly start adding notes, for example, from the A minor pentatonic. Back to that position. Okay. Just with those two. Then, for example, look for another A. You have it there. And D minor. So A minor, D minor. And do it the same thing. Example. So we have this one and how it connects with the next chord. Here you have another A minor here, the one I was playing just now, that connects really nicely with this D minor. And then you have another A minor here that we can go to this D minor. And in the if we think of this set of 3 strings, those are all the kind of possibilities that we have for that chord progression. Like this A minor with this D minor. We are here, and here we are repeating this position, but of the 12th fret. So that's a good way to start, playing these chords. Just taking these 3 string chords and mixing them with the scale. So each of these positions will fit with a different pattern from the scale. So try to find those and mixing them together.
Yep.
So for example, here I have. We can continue with that backing track. So for example, when I move here, you can see it as the second position of the pentatonic, the A minor pentatonic. So you can play around with that. So I will now just play the scale. I'm not thinking of the scale of chord changes. Which sounds good already, but this note is not part of the A minor pentatonic. Go back to the other position. See, now we're giving an example in these first 3 strings, but then you can take the second, the third, the fourth, these other set, the lowest strings, and then you get, you know, many combinations, and then you can use the full pattern for the six strings.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. So for example, now we've been doing it with 2 chords. How about we add more chords? So for example, the full progression that you were showing earlier. So we had this A minor, D minor, then I think you were going to C, right? F and E major. So those are all chords that you can easily find here. You have these major and minor chords, so that's when it comes, you know, handy to be familiar with those major and minor triads. So for example, we can go A minor, D minor, now C major. I think in this position, kind of like a G shape, but I'm just playing the top 3 strings. Now F, we can play there like this D position or C position, and then to play E, you just move the same shape that you had for F, you know, 1 fret below. So you have something like this. So that's a cool way to have, you know, visually the notes that you can target. So first I'm going to target these 3 notes. Then these other 3 for the D minor. Then I'm going for the C major, the C, then going to F major. Then again I have this note that is not part of the minor pentatonic, so targeting those 3 notes. You see, as long as we have, you know, major and minor chords, you can find those in these 3 top strings. So do you guys have any questions? I see.
The bluesman sent a question
The bluesman, yeah,
to me directly. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, how y'all doing?
D7 chord. Yeah, and now we're gonna start talking about other chords as well, because what we did so far was we were talking about triads, the basic chords. Okay, 3-note chords, which are the minor and the major chords. Okay. Now let's break them down and play them as note by note arpeggios, in spite of the cage system shapes. This is what I mean. What Miguel said earlier was that you can take any set of 3 strings, okay, as a smaller portion of the chord. So for instance, if this is an A major chord, for instance, right? I can use this little part here, or this little part, a set of 3 strings, or this little part, right? And it's still gonna be an A major triad, just in a different inversion, because what I have here is C sharp, E, A. What I have here is A, C sharp, E, or E, A, C sharp. Same 3 notes, repeating themselves in different octaves, okay? So these are all of the 3 inversions of a triad, a major, in this case a major triad, okay? Now let's take a look at what a triad looks like if you do not pay attention to the cage system, but just play it note by note as an arpeggiated chord. Now some of the notes may appear on the same string, so you cannot use a set of 3 strings in this case. This is what I mean. This is a root note, A, the root note of an A chord. Now, if it was an A major, I'm gonna need this note here for a third, because this is what a major third looks like, okay? This is the major third of A, C sharp. A major third is a note that sits 2 whole steps above the root, okay? And this here is the 5th, the way a power chord looks like on the guitar. This is an interval of a 5th. So that means that if I play this set of notes, this is a major triad, okay? Another way to play it is if I play the root with my index finger and then I play the 3rd on the same string, just 4 frets above. Instead of playing it here on the 4th fret of the A string, now I'm playing the same note on the 9th fret of the 6th string. So da 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 or da da da, same chord. Okay? So that means that I can use this, any of these 3 notes in an A major context, or any of these 3 notes. If I want to turn this into a minor chord, I'm just gonna lower that major third down to a minor third. So instead of playing, I'm gonna play 5, 3, 7, or 5, 8, 7, 8th fret of the 6th string. So this is what a major triad looks like, and this is what a minor triad looks like. Now if I play a minor triad, and then I repeat it 1 octave higher, and 1 more octave higher, I just played an A minor chord in 3 different octaves, okay? So A, C, E, A, C, E, A, C, E, repeatedly in 3 octaves, and then backwards, okay? So that's another way to think about chord chasing, okay? Now we're gonna play the same chord sequence of A minor, D minor using this method, okay? What we did before was using a small portion, a 3-string portion of the cage system shapes. Now we're gonna use the arpeggiating method of single note playing that I just showed you. So that means that if I have A minor, I can play something like this. And then for D minor, I can play something like this. Okay? So here's that same chord progression. Okay? I didn't do anything but play chord notes of each of the chords, okay? So I only used the 3 notes of the A minor chord over the A minor chord and the 3 notes of the D minor chord over the D minor chord, okay? Now, what we're gonna do next is answer the bluesman's question about the D7 chord. Now we're gonna expand the triads to 4-note chords, which are the 7th chords, okay? In a triad, what we have is a root, a 3rd, and a 5th. Now we're gonna add the 7th inside the chord, okay? So Root, third, fifth, seventh. That's a 4-note chord, also known as a seventh chord. Okay, we just as we have a few types of triads, the main being the minor and the major triad, or minor and major chord, based on what their third is. If we have a minor third, then we have a minor chord. If the third is a major third, then the chord is a major chord. Now, we can have a minor chord with a flat 7, or a minor chord with a sharp 7, and a major chord with a flat 7, and a major chord with a sharp 7. Okay? And this is what all of them look like. So, major triad with a major 7, or major triad with a minor 7, also known as a dominant chord, or a minor chord with a minor 7, we're not gonna bother with the minor chord major 7th today, because that is something that is used very rarely in some types of music. Okay? Alright, so answering the D7 question, that particular chord. This is what a D7 chord looks like. I suppose you mean a dominant 7 and not a major 7, because you are, after all, a bluesman, so you won't probably use a major 7 chord, but a dominant 7. So, this is what a D dominant 7 looks like. Also this. Also this. Also this. Also this. And maybe this, and many other inversions or different shapes of the same chord. But anyway, let's just focus on, let's say this one, the C-shaped D7 chord. That means that when soloing, I can use, if this is the chord in question, I'm gonna throw in some pentatonic licks. And now, what I did there, I just played the notes of the chord shape, okay? Now I'm gonna use a different shape. Now I use this D7 shape. Okay? Guys, do you understand this method? Do you understand what we're talking about? Do you have any questions? Please let us know. Who's got a question for us?
Okay, in the meantime, maybe we can take advantage of that question and, for example, see how it would look that in a blues progression. So, for example, let's say a D blues progression, since we started playing in D, we could take the same approach, as with the other chord progression of finding chords, these shapes, these three string shapes. So, for example, for the D7, we can have that one. Then we'll go to a G7 that we could maybe play this from here to that, and then we'll have an A7 that we can find it here, for example. I'm seeing this chord like that. So we have a D7, G7, A7. can think of, a blues. Let me grab a backing track. So look, maybe I will share my screen so you can see the chord progression going on. This is quite slow, so pentatonic, the chord. Now I'm going to the G7. Thinking of that shape. Now I'm going to the A7. You see, I organize my solo just by pretty much playing exclusively notes of the chord, but in a way that, for example, if I'm going from this to this, you see I have this movement. No, so it's not that just like a arpeggiating the chords, but thinking in a more linear way. So that's another way of applying this over a blues progression with seventh chords. I think that's a good way to not only to find the notes, but see how the chords connect one with the other. So seeing how these notes move up or down, see which notes you have in common. So all the things will help you, build your solos and playing these over the chord changes. Was there any question or
somebody said something? I don't know who it was.
I imagine something.
The blues man.
So, what makes it the 7th chord?
This is what makes it a 7th chord. If you take a scale, any scale, do you know how chords are being formed? What makes a chord a chord? Okay, so you need to take the first note scale-wise, and then the third note and the fifth note, so you're jumping in odd numbers, jumping in thirds, so to say. So root, third, fifth, and then if you go on, the least amount of notes that you need for a chord are 3 notes. Okay? You cannot have a 2-note chord. That's just an interval, not a chord. Okay? But when you have at least 3 or more different notes sounding together, that's a chord. Now the basic chord is called a triad, 3-note chord. And you need a root note, a third above it, and a third above the third, which is the fifth of the root. Okay? So 1, 3, 5. Scale-wise. Now, if you go on with this, the next note that you're gonna reach is the 7th of the scale. Okay? Let me demonstrate. This is a C major scale. Okay? So what I have here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If I keep only the root and the third and the fifth and the 7th, now I'm gonna rearrange the notes in a different fashion so that I can play all of them in the same time on different strings. What I had were the notes in the C major scale. I have the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now in the chord I will have the notes C, E, G, and B. okay? Because I'm playing root, 3rd, 5th, 7th. And here is a chord that has the notes C, E, G, B. And it's called a C major 7 chord, okay? Because it has, it's a normal 3-note chord, the triad, with an added 7th inside of it. And that's why it's called a 7th chord, okay?
And also something to take into account that because we've been talking about 3-note chords, but usually, you know, when we play a chord in the guitar, we strum, you know, at least 4, 5 strings, but that doesn't mean that the chord has 5 notes. Well, it does have 5 notes, but you have repeated notes. So for example, in a C major chord, you know, a classic open string C major, you have C, E, G, then you have another C, these are the same note, and then you have another E, those are the same note too. So even though I'm playing 5 strings, so you could say 5 notes, we only have 3 notes, just 2 of them are repeated in a different octave. And that's what happened with pretty much all these chords, these triads that are just minor and major chords. And yeah, when you add the 7th, usually you're replacing one of those repeated notes with that 7th. Just wanted to mention that it might, you know, some people can get confused that talking about 3-note chords, and yeah, we're playing, I don't know, 6 strings, and how can that be a 3-note chord? Cool, guys. So any other questions about this?
Or anything else. Could be unrelated to the subject as well, if you have any questions. I mean, at least guitar related. Here's that link again, by the way, if you wanna book your first call with the academy. Okay, no questions? All right, let's also expand a little bit more on this subject. You can also change, just as you're changing the chord, when the chord is changing, you're changing something in your phrasing, or you're using chord notes, and that's what chord chasing is about. You can also use a different pentatonic scale for each chord, okay? Because the pentatonic scale is basically a full scale that was stripped down a little bit. Some of the things were taken out of it. So for instance, this is an A minor diatonic scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In the pentatonic scale, what I have is 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. There is no second as an interval, and there is no sixth, okay? And that's what makes the pentatonic scale a very useful one, because you can use it in many different situations, regardless of the chord progression. Even if you can use it as a substitute for many modes, okay? We're not going to talk too much about modes today. I'm not going to bother you with that. That's a different subject. But I'm just going to tell you that the pentatonic, A minor pentatonic, is already contained in the minor scale, in the Dorian mode, and in the Phrygian mode as well, okay? So that means that if you have any kind of a chord progression that works with any of these modes, you can just use the pentatonic scale and will work just fine. Now, that means that we can also use a pentatonic scale, a different pentatonic scale for each chord in a progression, okay? So if I have this progression of A minor, D minor, I can just play A minor pentatonic when the chord is A minor. And and just change to a D minor pentatonic when the chord changes to a D minor chord. So here's an example. Here we go. As you're working with chord chasing again, because most of the notes of the pentatonic scale are already a part of the chord itself. So if you're using the pentatonic scale notes, you are already using all of the chord notes for that particular chord as well, as long as you are changing the pentatonic scale accordingly with the chord. Pun not intended, but yeah. Okay, so if we go on with this, you'll actually see that if you have even a more complex chord progression, let's say, I mean, it's not that complex, but we're just gonna throw in a few more chords here. So now we're gonna play A, then G, and then D minor. Okay, let's try that progression. So now let's try to think about this theoretically before we start playing. For the A minor chord, I am going to use the A minor pentatonic, of course. Now, what am I going to use for the G major chord? I'm going to have to think about, I can use a G major pentatonic. But since we're all much more comfortable on the guitar with the minor pentatonic shape, which is this one, I'm gonna try and think about which minor pentatonic scale is relative to G major pentatonic, okay? And if you already know that that's an E minor pentatonic, which is relative to G major, you can just use that scale while the chord is a G major chord, okay? Then for the D minor, I'm just gonna use the D minor pentatonic, and then for A minor again. So here we go. So I'm gonna play A minor pentatonic, E minor pentatonic, D minor pentatonic, back to A minor. You see? And it starts sounding way more interesting right away because I'm not just sticking to the same 5 notes. When I change the scale, some of the notes are shared between the 2 scales, okay? But some of them are not. So I will have some other notes there to work with as well, outside of the A minor pentatonic, okay? And that way I am following the chord changes much more beautifully, so to say, okay? And it sounds much more like I know what I'm doing, as opposed to just running up and down the pentatonic scale. Okay? Now, if you don't understand why I use the, okay, of course, for the A minor, I'm gonna use an A minor pentatonic. For the D minor pentatonic. Now, why did I use an E minor pentatonic for the G major chord? Okay? Let me explain that to you. Some of you might not know that yet. Every minor scale has its own relative major scale. Or every major scale has its own relative minor. What does this mean? This means that these 2 scales, this minor and this major scale, are actually sharing all of the notes. All of the notes of these 2 scales are the same. It is just a matter of where you start and where you end that scale, okay? Now, let me show you on the keyboard, because sometimes some things are easier to explain by using a keyboard. Give me a second. Can you see this? Okay, so if I start with a C note and I use only white keys, so no sharps and no flats, no black keys, this means that I'm playing a C major scale. Now, the schoolbook rule says if you start the major scale on its 6th step and then play the same set of notes, you're gonna end up playing the relative minor scale, okay? So what is the 6th step of C major? C, D, E, F, G, A. That means that over here, if I start and play white keys again, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, that's an A minor scale. And it is called relative scale to C major because they share the same notes. So they're relatives in that way. Okay, so now back to the guitar. Just as much as C major and A minor are relatives, so this is a C major scale, and this is an A minor scale. As you can see, I'm playing the same notes, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, or C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, okay? In the same way that you can see that A minor is relative to C major, how big of a distance is there between A and C? 3 frets, right? So that means that D minor, for instance, will be relative to F major. The minor chord together with the major chord 3 frets above. Okay? And in that same method, E minor would be relative to G major. So that means that they share the same notes. So the E minor scale has the notes E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D. And the G major has G, A, B, C, D, E, and F sharp. And then G again. Okay? So that's why over the G major chord, I was using an A minor pentatonic scale. Because the A minor pentatonic is E minor pentatonic is the same scale as the G major pentatonic. Okay? They share the same notes. Okay. Any questions? No questions? Okay.
No questions,
Miguel, do you
apparently.
have anything?
Yeah, maybe I just wanted to propose you guys maybe yet another way of practicing this, and especially if you're starting maybe learning, the triads and learning these chords, you can start just by choosing, for example, one note to target per chord. So for example, taking the same progression that you just played, so A minor, G major, D minor, and A. So I would recommend you first identify those chords, so A minor in that position, then G major, and D minor. And I will, for example, choose the note that is the different one from the scale. So from A minor pentatonic, when I go to G, it's this note, right? Here in the 7th fret. So I will choose that note to target while the G is going on. And I will just focus on that, and I will forget about the other notes. I will just play A minor pentatonic, but I'll go to this note that is kind of the different one. And then for the D minor, I'll choose this one, so this F in the 2nd string. So I have for the A minor, just A minor pentatonic. For the G, I'll go for this one, and for the D minor, that note. And you see, just by choosing one note, you're going to already be sounding a lot different. So I have here the progression. So A minor pentatonic. using this for the G, here for the A minor. Whoops. So you see, it's a fairly simple way to start chasing chords, you know, so with the same scale that we already know, just choosing one note per chord. You can just start with one chord at a time. So say I will just focus on the G and making sure to play that note in the G, and you continue with your A minor pentatonic, and slowly like that. Maybe then you can add two notes, and like that, then you'll be, you know, playing over the whole arpeggio of the chord. Okay, guys, so I hope you guys learned something new today. Maybe that you solved a couple of doubts, new ideas to practice, to try over your solos. And yeah, if you don't have any more questions, we're about to wrap this up. And again, one more time, we're going to share that link again. And if you enjoyed this session, and if you want more, if you're hungry for more, you can click on that link and check about what is it about the GuitarZoom Academy.
Okay, guys, thanks for joining, and see you next week. Thanks. Thank you.
No worries, guys.
Okay.
Thank
See
you.
you soon.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night. Good morning.
Yeah.